Hey everybody, Kira here with Kira Plays FF, and today we're going to do episode 2 of our character stats basics for War of the Visions Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Alright, let's go ahead and dive in because there's a lot to cover. We're going to start with the basics. Let's go ahead and pull up my Ayaka, my girl. We're going to start with the basics of what we know from in-game text and from the FAQs that exist out there from Gumi. And then we'll dive more in depth with the theory craft stuff, the stuff we don't know for sure, but is out there from either data mining or on the wiki or from JP testing or testing globally. Or anything that I was able to find on Reddit. Basically, I Googled how does a lot of this stuff work, and I found the most reliable looking resources and pulled them together because I figured a lot of people are probably doing that. Why not put it all in one place? Okay, so when we're talking about stats, we're going to start at a really high level and then we can drill down. So the very first thing we've got to think about is our characters, like awakening, their limit break, their unit level, and their job level. So I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but as you can tell, awakening impacts the max unit level, the max limit break level, and it unlocks access to sub-jobs, which then in turn obviously impact your access to abilities on the ability grid. Limit break impacts your max unit level as well, your max job level, which again impacts access to the abilities on the ability board, and it also unlocks your access to equipment slots, which is of vital importance. So unit level and job level are both, they both impact your raw stats, so the higher the number, the better. Job level and awakening level both impact access to the ability board. Now, the ability leveling system to enhance abilities of individual characters is a blind system right now. So if you want to know how much increasing the level on an ability actually impacts the ability's multiplier, you're going to want to go out to the War of the Visions wiki and take a look at the actual numbers there, because unfortunately it doesn't tell you how much investing that gil and job points is really going to increase the ability and what specific ways. Okay, so that's a pretty good overview. Let's start diving into what we know about the raw stats. And I'm going to start off with the official War of the Visions FAQ information. So a lot of this is no-brainer, when you run out of hit points, you die, and the attack stat is for physical, and the magic stat is for magic. But some of the nuancier things you see in here is that agility impacts both evasion and CT charge time, which we talked about in our first episode. Is charge time is 10% of agility stacked on top of itself until you get to 100, and that's how a turn works. Dex impacts both accuracy and crit. Luck impacts both accuracy and evasion in sort of a good for you and bad for you kind of way. And then also equipment stats are a thing. So that main stat page I had up, that's not all the stats. Gumi here differentiates that defense and spirit and crit, things that don't show up on that main page, are also stats that exist. And I contend that there's also things like evade, that's an equipment stat that doesn't show up in their FAQs or on the character page. So we'll go into that near the end. Some of the things you saw that I obviously glossed over on that last section were TP, AP, and Bravery and Faith. We covered TP and AP in depth in the first chapter, and I have a whole nother slide for Brave and Faith because this is another entry from the War of the Visions wiki in which they talk about Bravery and Faith and how both work. So I'm really excited. I love Brave and Faith because I'm a tactics nerd, and they work kind of the same way you would imagine they would, from how they worked in tactics. So with Bravery, you're going to be able to deal more physical damage. You're going to have a higher chance for physical reflex abilities to trigger. And if your Bravery drops below 10, then you turn into a chicken like tactics. So that's fun. Faith is magic damage done and received. Your reflex ability for magic stuff instead of physical. And it's also the occurrence rate for status effects. It also directly impacts your healing. So we can talk, that's really impacts your magic overall. Let's talk about how you can increase your Brave and Faith. So The barracks are ways that you can permanently increase your Brave and Faith, but also 1/4 of every Brave or Faith permanent change or change that you make in a fight can become permanent. So the max Brave and Faith that you could have on a character is 97, for the reason that I kind of just said, and that you can raise your Brave 4 and then it'll carry over as to 1 permanent stat, but you can't ever have more than 100 Brave or Faith in a fight. So the highest you could ever buff for yourself is to 100, so the highest you could ever be on a character stat is at 97. You can be buffed up to 100, but you'll never see that on the character sheet itself. All right. So let's talk about stats and equipment. And we're kind of in a split system between us and JP. Currently, in the global version that I play that you guys are watching me talk about, we only get the highest stat from a piece of equipment. And so I know that's a concept I struggled with at first, so let's just see it in action real fast. So you can see my Ayaka's equipment here. I've got a platinum rod that gives me 98 hit points. I've got a platinum robe that gives me 336 hit points, and I've got Sacred Step that gives me 240 hit points. But when I click right here and see how much stats I'm actually getting off my gear, I can see only that highest one, the 336 from my platinum robe, is what's actually being added, right? So I don't get all of those added together. You only get what the highest stat you get on any piece of gear is. So again, if I had a small amount of magic on my robe, but a high amount of magic on my weapon, I would never want to worry about increasing that tiny bit of magic on my armor piece as I'm leveling it up, because that stat's not mattering. Now in JP, they have changed, so we know often what happens in global, happens in JP comes to global, so we will see the change as well, but even still they haven't gone to a straight adding it across system. There's diminishing returns, and I don't know what the percentages are. I think it's 100 and then maybe 60-40, but don't quote me there. So it's still not a straight across system, even with the changes that have not yet come to global. All right, stats and equipment. Okay, so we're about to head into the damage equation, which is it's going to be a detail about how all of these stats end up interacting with each other. But before we understand how the damage calculation works, we need to understand the difference between skill bonus and skill multiplier. So there exists a thing called skill bonus, and that's when you're using, instead of just a regular attack, a skill or an ability. Different characters will get an increase to either their magic or their attack stat, whichever is being used for that, and whichever the character gets, it's either one or the other for every character, based on that unit's main job as well as their dex, agility, and luck. So what does that mean? There's the grid out there that you can look at. Let me go ahead and pull a screenshot of it up that shows you for every unit what percentage bonus they get added and to what stats. You can see they had attackers at the top of the list here, because you can see it's all attack people. And then different people will get different amounts. You can see Lilith there was getting slightly more. And then there's different amounts of each of those stats that they end up getting added. So Mont's getting, 25, 10, 10. Then you see 10, 10, 5 for, Engelbert. So the important thing to know about all this is you're not going to want to start stacking dex, agility, and luck in order to do damage. It's this is just a part of the equation and how it works. So it's not an amount, and you'll see that more as we see how the overall equation for damage looks. It's not something that you're going to start building your character towards. It's just a nuance of the system. Every individual character gets this slight adjustment to either their attack or magic based on some percentage combination of these 3 additional stats. All right. So let's see. So the other thing, so that's the skill bonus. Now the other thing that you're going to see inside the formula is skill multiplier. And skill multiplier is what we were talking about before, what percentage an individual skill is doing in damage. And it can be increased and enhanced in level. So let's say it's an attack ability that does 140% damage, and if I enhance it by 5 levels, now it's doing 150% damage. So it's 150% either your magic or your damage stat, whichever one that skill or ability uses, and then either with that additional whatever factor that is the skill bonus. All right. Before we do we're going to spend probably the most time staring at the damage formula. Before we do that, let's talk about status effects in the healing formula. This will be our chance to test our understanding of skill multiplier. So as you can see, the status effect formula is a combination of the target and the caster's faith added together, and then a skill multiplier. So depending on the skill, whatever sleep, debuff, whatever thing the status effect is, will have its own individual skill multiplier, minus the resistance that the target has for that thing. So you can see, just vaguely, the higher the two targets' overall faith, the higher chance that a status effect will work. And then, obviously if somebody has a resistance, that takes that away. Next is the healing formula. So it's the user's magic plus the magic that they get off their equipment. We remember how equipment stats work, times the skill multiplier. So like, is it Curaga? Is it Cura? Is it Curada? Each one of those have a different level of strength, times the faith multiplier. So you can see there that faith makes the healing stronger. And as I mentioned, nobody gets a bonus on healing spells from the magic damage stat that you get from like plussing out your platinum rod or whatever other bonus gear has those plus magic attack. So it's important to note that doesn't matter for the healing. All right, so let's talk about the physical and magical damage formula. So the first thing that we're going to look at here, they both have very similar formulas. I'm just going to go through them one section at a time. We both understand that first one, attack and magic, right? Pretty basic. Now let's talk about the first crazy one, which is main multiplier. So main multiplier is your skill multiplier, which we just covered. That's like what percentage your actual skill does, plus any type killer, element killer, and then you just get a flat 25% bonus if this hit is a crit, and we'll cover what's going on with crits after this. So just flat 25% bonus. So here's your main multiplier. So attack or magic times main multiplier. Next is damage type multiplier. So there are 5 types of damage in the game. There's slash, pierce, strike, missile, and magic. Different individual units will have different strengths and weaknesses at base, and then gear will impact these as well. And so you can see it's just like the amount of damage they do minus the amount of damage resistance somebody has is the part of the equation that deals with a bonus that you get for slashing and or a defense that you have for it. Next is element multiplier. Of note, this is the element of the skill or ability that you're using, not the element of the unit itself. The element of the unit itself is the last part of the equation, so it's got its own different separate spot. So like Ayaka's wind, but when she's casting holy, it's a light spell, so that's the element that we're going by. Anyway, so it has to do with the attacker's elemental percentage up, and then the target's elemental percentage resistance. Pretty straightforward. And then the part everybody would suspect, higher defense, lower defense, is going to make a difference in how much damage something does to you. Then you can see how bravery and faith come into play. So with bravery, you can see you add 50 to whatever this is. So if you had a brave of 97, the multiplier to your base attack would be, you'd be doing 147%. Faith is caster faith plus target faith divided by 100. So you can see if both had max, that you'd be doing 194% damage. All right, and then the last part of the damage equation is what I mentioned before. It's an actual unit type weakness. So my elemental me going up against your elemental you, is there a strength or a weakness bonus applied based on our oppositions on the elemental chart? All right, so let's talk about hit rate and evasion. Okay, so there are 3 stats that directly impact hit and evasion calculations. There's agility, there's dex, and there's luck. And they each impact it in different ways. So you can see there's target is how agility is factored, whereas for the attacker is how dex is factored. And then luck is like an increase, decrease based on the combination of both the target and the attacker, which I find really interesting. And then on top of these basics, there's a lot of modifiers that can increase or decrease somebody's either accuracy or their evasion, your chance to hit or your chance to dodge. So attacking somebody from the side or from behind is a huge percentage change. There's also raw and passive evasion up and down. There's also cards that you can use to increase the evasion stat. Espers can have additional agility, and obviously you have to remember, and we'll go over in the Esper video, that you only get a % based on how much affinity you have with that Esper, so it's important to consider that as you're considering which stats matter. And then also there could be abilities, including master abilities. So there are some characters that, like, just by base have a lot more agility, have a lot more dexterity, that make them better for being an evasive character. And then obviously there are exceptions to these formulas, right? There's automatic hit things like Holy and Sharpshoot. There's automatic dodge things like Reflex. And then there's pure status effect abilities don't seem to follow these same rules. So like sometimes something's both an attack and it's a status effect too. Like it'll have a defense down plus damage, in which case it's usually following the damage formula. However, when we see pure status effect things happen, it's got like a crazy different, almost like along the lines of the healing spell set of rules to it. So it's different. All right. So that's all I've got today, you guys. We're about to head into the shutdown for the server maintenance. No guild battle tonight, and tomorrow we're going to wake up able to turn our abilities off of our characters, and it is just going to be an absolute blast. I cannot wait to see all the crazy stuff that's going to happen in PvP guild battles as well as the arenas. I want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to Reddit user Hadeson. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I've got your name right there. He did a ton of the calculations. He was a day 1 JP player. He's got a lot of great posts out there. Also check out the War of the Visions wiki. There'll be a there'll be a post in the description. Thanks so much, everybody, for continuing to listen. Can't wait to get through this 10-part series. Everybody go check out Dr. Diggs. He's seriously the best. He's the reason I started coming out here streaming. You guys rock. Talk to you later. Bye.